Using lecture as a learning activity. This is part 3 in the teaching method series. I'm Dr. Grady Roberts from the University of Florida. We have 5 essential questions for this presentation. 1, what is a lecture? 2, how does a lecture relate to learning modalities and Dale's cone of experience? 3, when do you use a lecture? 4, how do you create a lecture? And 5, how do you deliver a lecture? First, what is a lecture? Well, a lecture is defined as an oral presentation by the teacher or other individual that may include a wide range of audio and/or visual aids. So it's an oral presentation that might include audio and visual aids. When we look at where a lecture fits in our taxonomy of learning activities that was presented in an earlier part of this series, a lecture is underneath the teacher-centered activities on the far left of this model. And if you notice and you look under the interactions between the teacher and the students, it involves information going from the teacher out to the students. If we look underneath the part of the model that looks at the autonomy in the learning environment, a lecture is a very teacher-controlled activity. When we look at lecture and consider learning modalities, really 2 of the modalities come to mind. First is if you are using visual aids as a part of your lecture, then your lecture will appeal to the visual learners because visual learners like to see things. By definition, a lecture will appeal to the auditory learners because auditory learners prefer to listen to things. And so a well-developed lecture can appeal to both visual and auditory learners. When looking at Dale's cone of experience, a lecture very often is going to fall near the top of Dale's cone, and it's going to be hearing words and perhaps reading from a notes or an outline that you might provide, and perhaps even looking at pictures that might be part of a presentation that you're giving. And so if we think about a lecture in terms of being concrete versus abstract, by definition, a lecture is going to present things in a rather abstract form. So when do you use a lecture? Well, lectures are great for disseminating factual information. So if you want to provide a good bit of information to your learners, lectures are good at doing that. Lectures are great at providing an organizing framework or organizing information for a particular topic. And lectures are very good at communicating your enthusiasm and excitement about a particular subject. And so lectures sometimes get a bad rap because they're overused or misused, but if you need to relay factual information, provide an organizing framework, or you want to communicate your enthusiasm, lecture is a good choice. So what are some of the problems with lectures? Well, poor lectures are boring, and we can probably all think of plenty of examples of poor lectures that we've had. Lectures set up themselves to have very passive students, and so your students are just sitting out there not doing anything but listening, and so students can be very passive. Lectures can be very poor if you have a monotone or a monotonous teacher, and we can probably all think of some examples of teachers we've had like that. And if you don't include visual supplements, lectures are only good for auditory learners, and so it only appeals to a small part of your students, and those are the auditory learners. So when you're developing a lecture really has several components. You're going to start with a brief overview, giving key points, highlighting key points. Then you're going to take each of those key points and you're going to develop them separately and provide some good solid information and support that with visual aids. And then you're going to wrap up with a closure to summarize your key points. So another way I like to think about it is a good lecture, you're going to tell them what you're going to tell them, you're going to tell them, and then you're going to tell them what you told them. So you're going to introduce it, you're going to provide a lot of detail, and then you're going to go back and summarize it. We talked earlier about the importance of having visual aids to supplement what it is that you're presenting, because that way you're going to add an appeal to the visual learners other than just the auditory learners. And so you might think about pictures, text, PowerPoint presentations, overhead transparency, specimens, examples. So a wide range of different things can be used to supplement your lecture with visual aids. As you're planning your lecture, one of the first things you need to do is figure out how you want to organize your lecture. And so you're going to create an outline, and as you're creating your outline, there are multiple ways that you can organize it. Perhaps you might organize it chronologically. And so maybe if you're presenting things that appear to go in a specific order by dates or time, that might be a good way to do it. You might organize it spatially. So if you're presenting relationships between different things, you might show how those organize together like that. You might present things in a cause-effect manner. You might present things in a problem and solution way. You can also present things in a topical way where you're organizing by different topics. And so there are multiple ways to organize a lecture. The key thing is that you pick a particular way and that you structure your lecture in a way that's going to make sense to your learners. You also want to organize yourself. And PowerPoint has a neat function. Many of you will probably want to use PowerPoint to supplement your lecture, to provide that visual part of your lecture. And so PowerPoint gives you the opportunity to create an outline function, or you can also present print the pictures of the slides with your notes below it. And these can be used for you as the lecturer to guide your presentation, and you can also, if you choose to, provide these to your learners as well to help them follow along. So if you want to be a good lecturer, what are some things to consider? Well, one, you need to know your audience. It's difficult to pre-plan a lecture without understanding who you're presenting to, where they're coming from, and why they might be interested in what you're presenting. Good lecturers are also very enthusiastic, and we talked earlier about lectures being a good way to communicate your enthusiasm about a particular topic. Good lectures are enthusiastic. Good lecturers speak clearly and in an appropriate pace. They're not too quick, they're not too slow, nice appropriate pace. They illustrate major points, and so they stop and emphasize and draw attention to major points, and then they summarize at the end. And so if you want to be a good lecturer, know your audience, be enthusiastic, speak clearly at an appropriate pace, illustrate major points, and summarize at the end. So some key points to remember. Lectures are good ways to convey factual information. Keep your lectures short and to the point. Develop and use appropriate visual aids to enhance your lecture and appeal to those visual learners. Every lecturer should have and begin with a brief overview of the key points, expand each of the points you made, and then summarize and draw things together at the end. So our essential questions for this presentation were, what is a lecture? And we talked about that. How does a lecture relate to learning modalities in Dale's Cone of Experience? We talked about that. When do you use a lecture? How do you create a lecture? And how do you deliver a lecture? And so hopefully now you've got a basic foundation in using lecture as a learning activity. If you'd like further information on this topic, I've provided my contact information below. Thanks and have a great day.